Good morning, greetings everyone. My name is Ginelwe Natu and I will be facilitating this session. After yesterday's morning panel discussion, we learned the gap between the university decolonization and Africanization agenda and the students' idea of the Africanization and decolonization agenda. I think that just stresses the importance of engagements, these kinds of engagements, so that we can sort of fill this disconnectedness between students and the university management. Not to dwell too much on that, I would like to call today's panel. We invited the Deputy President of the SRC, Sisipo Patesi. You can take your seat. And we also have Abdul Yassef, Chair of the French Society, and we also have Dumisani Boyson, the Chairperson of the Black Lawyers Association. Can we please just engage with their presentations, listen carefully, and at the end of their 10-minute presentation each, we will be granted at least 20 minutes and 5 minutes of grace to discuss their presentations. They will answer questions associated with the role of students and student leaders or societies in the project of the Africanization and decolonization of the university, their challenges, and the kind of society they imagine in the context of the university's decolonial and transformation agenda. Without wasting any time, my program here, on my program, first in the list I have Dumisani Boyson to please give us a 10-minute presentation answering the questions I just highlighted on the end of my introduction. Dumisani Boyson.
First of all, I would just like to thank our facilitator and also just thank, just be thankful for the opportunity to be here and also be able to give this presentation. I would like to just observe all protocol and just greet every person that is present. Now, in preparing for this presentation, I found that I have more questions than I have answers. And that is just because of all the nuances that surround the topic of Africanization and decolonization. And in trying to do my research and reading through some of the views of the academics, both in the proponents and also the critics of Africanization and institutions, as well as decolonization, I found that, I might be punching above my weight class. But these are things that we need to engage in as students as well. Now, first, I just want to come from, the view of students when it comes to decolonization and Africanization. And we were posed with 4 questions. What is the role of students? What work are we undertaking as our organizations? The challenges we face, and also what type of future do we imagine? And I think in terms of the roles, first the role of students, the role of student leaders, and the role of our student societies. I think these are probably the easiest to acquire. The role of students when it comes to these things, especially with the curriculums, Africanization curriculums, is to engage in these curriculums. I think it's very important that students need to engage in all of these programs, that they engage in the curriculum that is brought by the institution. And as the student, as the student leaders, we are supposed to be there to bridge the gap between the institution and the institution. The role of our student societies is to create spaces for expression, to create spaces that will promote this engagement for students. Because if we really look at it, a lot of our students are not as engaged as we would love them to be in such programs and in such discussions. And that is why we, as the student societies, we need to make sure that we create spaces where our students feel free and where they are brought closer to this type of discussions, to this type of works, so that they can also engage, so that their voices can be heard. And as the student leaders, we need to be sure that we are the voice of the masses, because those are the people that we represent. Now, as the Black Lawyers Association student chapter, we have undertaken quite a few projects that we think contribute to Africanization and decolonization. As part of the remnants of apartheid and the colonial systems that we had before, we are still struggling with student hunger today. We still have academic disadvantages because we have so many students that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And in trying to sort of close these gaps that are created through student hunger and academic disadvantages due to lack of resources. In terms of student hunger, the projects that we undertake is we work in collaboration with the law faculty and also the Law Student Society on the Ubuntu project, bringing sandwiches and coffee to the students that don't have, that don't have food, that are plagued by student hunger. Also, we also run our own donation drives to try and feed as many students as possible. And these things are things that are necessary because these are the plights of our students. And in terms of the academic advantages due to these lack of resources, we need to acknowledge these lack of resources that a lot of our students have when they come into these higher learning spaces. And also the fact that these disadvantages that come from this make it much more difficult to succeed in higher learning spaces. So we run a lot of academic workshops, financial planning workshops, we have advocacy trial training, we have mooting, and we have other projects that we run to try and bridge that gap in terms of trying to make sure that every student has the resources that they will need to succeed in these spaces. The challenges that we face, I think, like any other organization, a large challenge sometimes with trying to realize these projects comes down to funding, but also a lack of engagement from some of our students. And I think this lack of engagement comes from the fact that as an institution, there isn't really much unity among students, because we are so scattered, and with our societies we try and create groups where we create communities for students where they can feel like they belong. And also another challenge that we faced as an organization is, COVID had disrupted so many of our programs, and it's almost like we are now forced to restart and to rethink and to redo some of the groundwork that has already been done pre-COVID. Just to try and re-establish some of the programs that we have had, and also try to find new ways to cope and adapt to the environment that we are in now. And then the final point is just on the futures that we imagine, where the institutions should be in accordance with the institution's Africanization and decolonization vision. And I think we are built on an iconic name, the iconic name of Nelson Mandela. And we need to realize that Nelson Mandela was a very dynamic person. He had many phases in his life. Starting off, we had Nelson Mandela, the son of the chief. We have Nelson Mandela, the revolutionary. We have Nelson Mandela, the student. We have Nelson Mandela, the president. We have Nelson Mandela, the prisoner. And through all of these stages, there were dynamic changes throughout his life. There were changes in the way that he viewed things, and then there were changes in the way that he did things. And I think if we are going to have any sort of growth in any sort of topic that we engage in, we need to also not be static. And I think the future that we imagine as an organization with our contributions within the law faculty, where most of our work is done, is that we make sure and ensure that whatever we endeavor in, that we are not static, that none of the programs that we introduce are static and only focus on certain aspects, but rather is continuously growing and changing and adapting to the environment that we find ourselves in, and continually there's continuous upscaling, continuously trying to find new ways to bring Africanization and decolonization to the front. And also not to focus just on certain aspects of Africanization, but trying to make sure that everyone is equally represented. Essentially, I just want to, as an organization, we just want to make sure that at the end of the day, after all of our contributions have been made to the institution, our contributions would have helped in ensuring that all students, through Africanization, through decolonization, have been granted an equal opportunity to succeed, and that they have equal access to all resources available to them. Thank you.
Thank you, leadership. Thank you, Dumisani. That was the chairperson of the Black Lawyers Association student chapter. Next, without wasting any time, I'd like to call the chairperson of the French Society, Abdul Yassif. I hope I didn't butcher your surname. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Please correct me.
Sir, just good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am the newly elected chairperson for the French Society 2024. I am natively Nigerian, so I wouldn't say that I see or have as much relation to the Africanization, decolonization experience as you native South Africans would be, but I love the opportunity to speak about it. I love the opportunity to have more of a discourse. Surprisingly, the only university I applied to when I was in the process of applying, when I was done my matric, was the Nelson Mandela University. And that's because of the amount of respect that I have for the hero who made a lot of efforts to bring South Africa to be a free country, to end apartheid. And I am here today because of how much it's inspired me to continue such discourse, and hopefully the engagement from the student societies would only further break more ground we need to push more on the topic of decolonization. To start off this speech, I would like to begin with a quote. A generation which ignores history has no past and has no future. To further hone in on my view of the decolonization topic, the France has a huge history of colonization in Africa, and we still see such effects today. When they were about to leave Africa, they made a lot of peace treaties under the guise of they need to protect African countries from the communist views, and they need to have these deals with African countries so they could further stand on the level of other first world countries, because that was supposed to be their gateway into gaining respect as part of the communities. However, that was simply a ploy so they could gain access to Africa's resources, like we are seeing today. A lot of countries that France colonized are still poor, are still not able to sustain themselves. They're still regarded as third countries. They are known as the countries with the highest poverty rates in the world. So, therefore, all the promises made has proven to be false. But I would like to say it also has some benefits, and that is the view we should move forward with. Because we see there are a lot of Francophone countries. It is one of the most spoken languages in the world currently. And that's because the African countries, although they have been disadvantaged from the start, what they did was they took the culture of France and they made it their own. We have, for example, Senegal, Wolof. They speak Wolof and France in Senegal. Similar words used between two languages. And that's because, according to another quote, they look at the language French as one of the spoils of war. Although they were targeted by the country France for their natural resources, they took that experience and the community that it built, which is why you see a lot of camaraderie between a lot of the Francophone-speaking countries now, because that is the situation that has been created from the colonization. So we look at the positive aspect of it, not only how disadvantaged it has made Africa in the long run. CFA is the currency being used by a lot of those countries, and that has made them have access to first world countries. For example, Ghana recently made several deals with China and France to destructure their debt and are moving forward onto becoming one of the fastest developing countries in Africa. So that is what I believe to be the Africanization-Decolonisation. It is not to look at our history as, the things keeping us down, but rather to gain experience from it and push to be one of the greatest continents of the world, because we were destined to be. It's common fact that life began from Africa. It's common fact the majority of the natural resources are from Africa. So we can't continue to live with the mindset that we are less and we are inferior to the people who have put that mindset on us. We are greater than them, and that is why they try to infuse that into our heads so we could not grow to our potential. But now we know better. To further speak on the views that most of the countries hold now, I would like to speak about a quote from Amadou Hampâté Bâ. He said, "Men can achieve a common goal with using the same path." And that goes to show that if we all put our heads together, me being in Nigeria, the residing country, the residing colonial power in Nigeria was actually British. So I don't really have much of a connection to how France has destabilized most of the African countries. But through my years of growing, I've gotten to meet so many people from different cultures, Senegalese, for example, Togo, and other Francophone-speaking countries. So our plight is their plight. That is what it means to be African, because we share that history of colonialism and we have the opportunity to grow from it. And in that regard, what I've tried to do, being the chairperson of the French Society, is to shed light on the history and show how we can grow from it. So there are many projects in that regard. We plan to have a French Society Expo moving forward. We also plan to donate to many disadvantaged communities in South Africa. So, some suffering from xenophobia that haven't been able to get as many opportunities as they'd like to have, rather. So I'm so grateful to be invited to this this convention to speak more about that. And yeah, sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick catch-up. Dumisani Boyson gave a very nice presentation of the inclusion of students in certain portfolios of the university, which includes curriculum engagement and designs, Yasef gave a very nice overview of African history and French colonization and its impact on language. He gave a very nice overview of that and spoke on the emancipation of African people from the West and uniting Africa. Next on our panel is the SRC Deputy President, which is going to give us a 10-minute presentation as well. Sisipo Patesi. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I hope everyone's well. My name is Sisipo Senkosi Patesi. I am the SRC Deputy President for 2024. So to answer the question about the role of students, student leaders, and student societies in the project of Africanization and decolonization in universities is pivotal. I think I can think of a few ways in which we are contributing or we can contribute to the project. We can contribute through advocacy and activism. Student leaders and societies can advocate for changes in curriculum, policies, and practices to reflect the African perspective, knowledge systems, and experiences. We can do this through peaceful demonstrations and awareness programs that raise consciousness about the need for decolonization. Secondly, we can contribute through cultural and intellectual spaces. Student societies can create platforms for dialogue, just one like this, to discuss, debate, and for cultural expression that celebrate African heritage. These spaces can foster a sense of belonging for individuals coming from diverse backgrounds. Lastly, through community engagement. We can actively participate in community engagements addressing pressing issues that South Africans face. Issues like poverty, inequality, environmental degradation, and human rights violation. By connecting our academic learning to real-world challenges, we can contribute transformative change at a local, national, and global level. So in overall, students, student leaders, and student societies play a pivotal role in driving the Africanization and decolonization agenda within universities by challenging certain structures and fostering an inclusive working environment. I'm part of the EFFSC, so I will speak on behalf of the EFF. The EFF is known for its advocacy of Africanization and decolonization across various globes, various spaces of society. So we do this through curriculum transformation. The EFF has been very vocal in calling for the decolonization of education in South Africa, particularly in universities. We advocate for the inclusion of African history, literature, art, and perspectives in schools and universities, in university curricula, We do that to challenge the dominance of Eurocentric knowledge and narratives. So the EFF's efforts towards Africanization and decolonization encompass a wide range of issues, from education and language to land reform and economic empowerment. We seek to challenge colonial legacies, empower marginalized communities, and foster a more just and equitable society reflective of Africa's heritage and aspirations. The EFFSC faces several challenges in driving the Africanization and decolonization agenda within the university context. We face a number of issues, but just to highlight one, it is the lack of awareness and understanding. Some members within the university and students themselves may lack awareness and understanding of the concept of Africanization and decolonization, leading to misconceptions and misunderstandings of the agenda. Addressing this lack of awareness and fostering a dialogue and education around these topics may be challenging but essential for building support and consciousness. The EFFSC may face challenges in securing adequate resources to support its agenda, particularly if university budgets and allocations are predominantly towards maintaining existing structures and programs. Just to add on what the chairperson of the Black Lawyers Association said, Nelson Mandela was a dynamic individual. He advocated for the importance of education. So what the EFF plans to achieve in the long run is to ensure that all Black academically deserving individuals enter all university spaces. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sisi Popadesi. We heard our engagements. Can someone? Okay. We heard our presentations from our panel. What I like about those presentations, they were very short and sharp. So that gives us at least 22 minutes to engage with those presentations. What I like particularly with these discussions is that they paint a vivid picture of what is really happening on the ground. They give a practical sense of decolonization, an idea of decolonizing in practice. With that being said, let's hear what you are the panel, and you are called the audiences. Yes, what the audiences have to say. I would love for us to please engage with these 20 minutes very carefully. Keep time in mind as well. Yes, I'm going to start by taking the first round of questions and follow with the second round of questions. First round of questions, I have one hand up. 2, 3. Wait, I don't have anyone to assist me with the mics, fortunate. Oh, okay. I have one hand on this side. In fact, 3 from the other side. Okay, we have 1. And then Prof, 2, and then behind Prof, 3. And then we have 4, sorry sir for pointing at you. And then 5 at the far back there. We can start with your question. It may be questions, engagements, but keep it short and simple.
Okay, thank you. Jingulu Tando Wakwambana, Mandela Uni RIFA chairperson for 2024. Mandela Uni RIFA is a student chapter that is under the network of Rethinking Economics for Africa. I just want to comment and maybe pose a question. Firstly, I would like to thank the panel for their brief presentations, and I'm glad that they touched on the different aspects of Nelson Mandela. For example, Nelson, the British subject, Dalibunga, the Xhosa man, and more. But I just want to say, I think in order for us to achieve the agenda of Africanization, decolonisation, is by decolonizing the mind of students, by what the first speaker said of the role of societies and the role of students, because we have to create space there whereby we're going to broaden the information of decolonization. And I just want to make a submission that according to me, student activism in our generation is dead. It's dead because of student leaders who deal with politics of mild protests instead of politics of challenge. Student activism is dead to such an extent that ever since I've been in leadership in the university, ever since 2022, I have never heard one day that the SRC is calling student leaders to student parliament to show that the student activism is dead. Maybe if student activism was still active, we wouldn't be facing the challenge, some of the challenges that we're facing now. And I just want to say, we have student leaders who do not want to be held accountable. We have student leaders who do not want to be held accountable. And I just want to close by saying that I want to ask a question to the panel, that what ways do they have in mind that we can implement to try and revive student activism of Nelson Mandela University? And then I just want to close by just saying that there's a read by Ngungi Watiango, a book he published that says Decolonizing the Mind. So if one is interested, can go and have a look on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Lutando, Prof.
No, thanks, Program Director. I'll cut to the chase in the interest of time. First, I appreciate the fact that we have a student voice, because we cannot build this continent without involving students. A broad question to the panel: why do you think student activism, that is building on what my colleague has just said, why do you think student activism is fading at higher education institutions? I will explore this point later when I do my own presentation. Yusuf, you seem worried about the fact that Francophone African states are poor. Are you not maybe wanting to check why the French were here in the first place? Because the British adopted indirect rule, and then the French adopted assimilation. Basically, if you're on the side of the French, they took you to France. Some of the African people have French citizenship. So the idea was never, in fact, to develop the continent, but to take the cream of the crop from Africa and then give them French citizenship, which is why at the Pan-African Parliament here, one of the so-called members of Parliament suggested that we should move the headquarters from Johannesburg and take it to Mali. Don't you think this assimilation versus indirect rule has a role to play here? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if I'm audible.
Just a little. You are a little audible.
Oh, good morning, everyone. My name is Samgela Mkhwanazi from the Madiba's Debate Union. I think my question has already been asked, but I just wanted to take you back to the education system of South Africa and look at the curriculum that is being taught on a basic level of our education, especially the incorporation of the subject history. And when we look at that curriculum, we have an understanding that up until grade 9, I think, history is compulsory, because when we look at the concept of decolonization, it is very important to remember the history. So now kids go through this system of basic education up until grade 9, and they are essentially not taught about this discourse of decolonization. They are taught about Western ideologies at a great extent, right? And today, there was a contributor that talked about being, which he said is a state of mind. And immediately when he said that, I thought of Chris Hani and his ideology of black consciousness. It is very sad to understand that kids in primary education and even in high school are not exposed to these kinds of discourse, which then, as a result, leads to what the SRC, the deputy SRC president said, that there is this sort of lack of awareness of such discourse in university institutions because of this lack of knowledge at a very basic level of education. So my question was then, given that you guys are working closely with students, number one, do you feel like students are aware, or do you feel like are aware of such discourse? And if they are aware, what is it that makes them not willing to partake in such discourse? And what is it do you think must be done in order to incentivize these students to take part in such discourse in order to be able to move the minds of the colonized minds to realize their true being? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please, can you please repeat your name for me? I didn't get your name at all. Okay. Thank you, Samgelo. Thanks, Nadia. Next question. Can you please try and keep the questions short? Sorry, I gave too much time to the last 3 questions.
Don't worry, mine is very short.
Okay.
My question is directed at the student chapter of the BLA, and simply it is, how would your chapter go about Africanizing, decolonizing the LLB curriculum?
Good day, everyone. My name is Pamela Legama. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Botany. I have 2 questions, or at least areas of discussion that I think needs to be talked about. One of them, as I see some of the discussion, certainly I've been here very shortly, so I apologize for that, has to do with governance, aspects related to how our country is governed. And what are we doing as agents of change to effect that change? Because we're not happy with how things are being administered. And then another issue that I'd like to sort of touch on is perhaps something that might be a bit sensitive to many, has to do with religion. How is religion essentially also being part of the colonized mind? There are a number of denominations that the country has. We seem to mostly lean towards the Judeo-Christian sort of angle, but we forget all the other religions that exist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Pmelela. If there is no any other question on the ground, Nadia, I have one question online to Usisipo Patesi. This person writes, if I heard you correctly, you've positioned the students primarily as a catalyst for change in the university. You've said that students can advocate and challenge systems through various methods, including peaceful protests and demonstration. I'm interested in why you chose the word peaceful to describe disruption. I am by no means critiquing it. I find it interesting that you associate peace and disruption. This may marry with the sentiments of the first question. So I guess the question is leaning more towards ways of protesting, peace and disruption, and students being the catalyst for change. I don't know if you want me to go over the questions again. If you need me to go over the questions again, please indicate, because I have noted certain points from the questions, but I'm assuming that you've heard the questions correctly or properly. The first question from Ulutando, it was basically a comment and then followed with a question around ways to revive student activism and in the university and holding student activists accountable. Yes. And then Prof asked a question related to why do you think that student activism is failing in higher education institutions? And that's a broad question to the rest of the panel. And then for the French Society, the third question was related to, also Prof made a comment on the French Society. I'm sure you noted that question as well. Comment or question. And then the third question was from Samgelo. I didn't get the question really. I got distracted there for a moment. But DP, you got the question because it was directed straight to you. And then there's a question directed to the chairman of the Black Lawyers Association around the LLB curriculum. Good luck. And then there's a question from Mr. Pumelele as well around governance and the administration of the country. I think that was more of a comment than a question. You also made a comment around the exclusion of certain religious practices and the prioritization of Christianity. It's interesting. I am going to start off by Sisibo.
Thank you for those thought-provoking questions. I think I'm going to answer the first, second, and third question and the last one all together. Lutando, I think we can look in that student parliament thing. And I think it's hard to revive student activism because students have a mentality of, if it doesn't affect me, I'm not going to be included in it. So I think if we start there by conscientizing students about why we have protests, why we have demonstrations, why we have petitions, I think that if we could challenge that, it would be activated in a way, and then we would look into that student parliament thing. The last question was, why did I, may you please just repeat it for me?
The very last one from online is, you've said that students can advocate and challenge system through various methods of protesting, including peaceful protests. So this person is interested into knowing why you would associate protesting, and Tina, why you would choose the word peaceful to describe disruption. Why would you put peaceful and protest in the same?
I believe that before anything else, there should be engagements, before we take it to the streets and before we demonstrate. So I believe engagement is also part of protesting in a way. Yeah, thank you.
So, yep, Sisipo, I think you haven't covered everything. There's also a question from why do you think activism is failing higher education institutions?
I covered that.
You covered that?
Firstly,
Okay,
yeah,
I'm sorry for that.
I think students have a mentality of saying, if it doesn't affect me, I'm not going to be included in it. Yes.
Okay. Let's move straight to the chairperson of the French Society. I think you have heard your questions. Please respond to the questions and comments.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. In response to Prof, I agree with what you mean, the assimilation of France in Africa. And to further expand on that point, I would like to present a little history from my own country, Nigeria. When we had the civil war known as the Biafran War, which was when the Igbo people wanted to dissociate from us and have their own country because they felt they have been discriminated against for the longest, because when the British people shared the power, it was mostly the North that had most of the power, and they felt they didn't have the same opportunities as people in the North. Although the North has a higher population than the rest, they still felt like it wasn't distributed proportionately. So when the Civil War happened, the person really funding those projects was the France. They wanted to give the Igbo people power to dissociate because of their own personal ambitions of having access to the resources that Nigeria have. And that hasn't been the only situation, as we all know. So I agree with you on that note that is the method that they employ, assimilation, where they basically feed you with the notion that, if you work with us, we're going to protect you from this, that. After colonization was packing out, they still employed bases on several African countries that covered about 40% of the continent. So it has been a tool they have been using. We've seen many African descendants in France. I mean, even the national football team was basically African, as we saw, and so that was Africa's victory, not France's victory. So. Yeah, I agree with you on the train of thought that you proposed. I think that has been an issue so far. But I also do believe that recently the continent of Africa has been making strides, like the news that I brought up where Ghana is restructuring their debts and actually being on its way to a developing country. And we have instances like countries like Rwanda as well. So that just goes to show that the discourse of decolonization is actually showing a lot of progress in recent years. African countries are learning to be self-sustainable. We're investing in other places, and a lot of the debts that we were basically duped to get is getting more or less fixed. And so we're well on our way on developing, which I think is a huge victory for the continent. Thank you. And to also touch on what Sam Kello said, where he brought up the fact that growing up, we're mostly fed the Western ideology rather than learn about our own history. And I mean, that has been a tactic that has been used for a long time. I don't remember the name, but I believe there was a letter sent to the British Parliament where they said if we want to invade Africa, we have to make them forget their culture. So that has been a tool of let's feed them what happens in our country, so they feel more inclined to be part of that culture. I mean, we see with a lot of Africans in diaspora, once they go to another country and they get the citizenship, they start believing they are part of that country, but those are not where your roots lie. So I think it is vital to keep on reminding Africans of their culture, and it is okay to be proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
I have 1 minute, I see, so I'm going to go try and go over this as quickly as I can. In terms of how can we go about decolonizing the LLB program, I think important is first we need to establish our understanding of what we want in terms of decolonizing the program. And that would require engagement, but also understanding that for the longest time, African customary law has always been put in the back foot throughout apartheid, with the governor generals essentially taking up supreme chieftaincy over all the tribes, and all the tribes being essentially ruled by a white man and controlling the laws. So I think a starting point is essentially in focusing on bringing back African customary law and making sure that students understand that African customary law is a living law and is always ever-changing, and also to bring it to the forefront in the legal fraternity as a whole. I think that would be a good starting point. But I also want to touch on a few of the other questions that were posed as well. Sam essentially brought up the basic education, and I think it is important that where Africanization and decolonization is concerned, that we start where the minds of our children are still very malleable. Because if we only start with Africanization in high institutions, the thought processes of our students are a lot less malleable, and they are a lot less adapt to change. Also, I think with regards to what Prof said, with the assimilation and direct rule, we can just look at the example of the difference between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, with the differences between how they were ruled, with Haiti being ruled by the France essentially through assimilation as well, and how that has left the economy of Haiti today as opposed to what their direct neighbors, the Dominican Republic, is looking like today. And in terms of why we think activism is fading, I think it's a combination of factors. There isn't really much unity within our university space between students. We lack a sort of student culture. We lack, I would like to make an example. I've seen a lot of universities where there is a lot of inter-society, student organization events, as well as inter-residence events just between the residences themselves to promote student culture. And I think that is something that is lacking in our institution that needs to be revitalized. And also our leadership, student leadership for the most part, for quite a while has been quite inaccessible to students. And that is something, when I came into office, that I identified and said that during my term, I want to make sure that the Black Lawyers Association student chapter is a lot more accessible to students so that they know where to go when they want to engage with their issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to give a chance. Please, Dr. Jenny, I'm going to need that 5 minutes you suggested earlier on. I'm going to give a chance to Prof. Kit.
Yeah, no, colleagues, I'm sorry for putting my hand up. I just wanted us to just affirm the historical contribution of student activism in social change over many, many, many decades. Now, we can have debates about whether the strategies and tactics and the energy has going in this direction or that direction. But I think, and the question that Becky also raised is great, and the responses has been fabulous. But I want the university community just to affirm in the own historical production of higher education the crucial role of student activism within our own spaces. So I don't want that to be up for debate, because historically it would not be accurate to do so. Students have been an important role players in driving social change. We may differ on various fronts on pathways, but that's just something that we would have to acknowledge, okay? So I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. On that note, I'm so sorry. On that note, there's a lot of questions coming in, but I'm not going to attend to that. I just want to quickly add this point that is coming from Utandiswa Changase, which leans more towards the question of Prof and Sam at the back on student activism and its failure. She says that if you are a vocal student leader and attend to question things and want to hold people accountable, you become a target and face special victimization. An active person will immediately want to withdraw facing that intimidation. I think the lady online just put icing on the cake there with all the answers that the student leaders have given on that question of why student activism is failing in higher learning institutions. The question is very personal. Thank you so much. I would like to close the session in that way. I am Ginelo Natu from the ETP office. Thank you for joining this panel discussion. Thank you.